Welcome, Lisa. How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Thanks for sitting with us today and having this conversation. We want to talk quite a few subject matters around your journey and your work experience. But if you don't mind sharing briefly your background and your journey in the disability sector.
Sure. So professionally, I started my career as a registered nurse, and that was over 35 years ago. And most of my career as a nurse has been in hospitals and in senior leadership roles within hospitals. So my last nursing role was a director of nursing with St John of God Healthcare, and then there came an opportunity to take up the role as CEO for their disability service at St John of God Healthcare. So I stepped into that role, and that was my first step professionally into disability. Why did I move out of hospitals into disability? Because hospitals are a really interesting place to work, and they're certainly not dull, and I love the interaction with all the people that I used to work with and our purpose and things. But I have a son who's almost 25 years of age, and he has a severe physical and intellectual disability. And I felt that my experience as a mum and the shoes that I'd walked in for so long were so significant that I really needed to leverage on that in a professional space, and so I took the leap out of acute care into disability in a CEO role. So I was there at St John of God Accord as their CEO for 3 years, and in that time I also took on responsibility for all community services across St John of God Healthcare, which included community mental health, social outreach, home nursing, and also international health services in East Timor, and until the opportunity at Scope came up just over 12 months ago. So I've been here at Scope, and I guess the move into Scope was about, well, if I'm serious about leaving a footprint in the sector, there's no better place to do it than at Scope as one of Australia's largest disability providers. So that's what brought me here.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing the story. I would like to start not just a clinical experience, but your lived experience.
Yeah.
How has that, evolved? The learnings, your personal learnings, not just within disability when you were started working disability, but while you were working in the health system.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think I can probably go back to my childhood, and my mum had a brother with Down syndrome who lived on a farm as part of what would have been called a sheltered workshop back then, and we used to visit him frequently on that farm, and so I was always around other people that had disability. It was sort of part of our family, and it wasn't something that I thought was different or anything. I just grew up with it. And then so I was probably in my early teens when that farm was closed down and he was moved into accommodation in the community with other people with disabilities, very similar to the model that we have today. And so I remember that really, really well, and we got to know the 3 or 4 other gentlemen that he lived with extremely well. They became part of our extended family, and they all used to visit our family home for dinner and things like that on a regular basis. So I guess, that's my first real footprint with disability. And then I went along and, you just traverse through life and you travel and you become a nurse and you do all of those things. And then I had my firstborn son, and at the age of 8 months we learnt that he was to have spinal muscular atrophy, and that he would never walk, and he in fact never rolled over or never sat up. So he's now 25. So, there's been a lot of water under the bridge, so to speak, since that time. But I think it's been a really significant journey of persistence, of resilience, of hope, of grief, of sadness, of complete joy. And I guess when you reflect and look backwards, whilst I always say I would change the outcome of my son who's so profoundly disabled, I wouldn't change him because I think he's amazing, and I think the perspective that he's brought me and the lens that he's brought to my life and who I am today, I wouldn't be who I am if I hadn't have walked in those shoes. So I think you learn a lot about yourself when you care for somebody like I have for my son. So I think it's a combination of all of those things, and I guess on that journey, you have so many battles. You have health battles for your child, you have battles with bureaucracy, you have battles in trying to attract funding for your family member, you have battles to advocate for the rest of your family who need a break and a rest and all of those things. Everything feels hard all of the time, and you get pretty savvy at it, but it is exhausting. And I think being able to have true empathy for others that I support professionally is really important, and I can do that from a really authentic space because I still live and breathe that bureaucracy and those challenges.
Wow. And just transitioning from your lived experience and what you have, brought a lot more empathy and an understanding for the rest of the disability ecosystem, and the role with the cord and how has that was evolving, and what are the learnings you have seen in the last what are the parallels you can draw between a health system and a disability system?
Yeah, look, it's funny, but I feel that I draw on my nursing apprenticeship, I say, or my qualification every day, and more so in this role and in my CEO role at Accord than what I did when I was running a hospital full of nurses. It really goes hand in glove as people age and they go to hospital and we treat them in hospital, and many times people with a disability may even go to ICU and they'll come out of ICU and they live longer and they're treated medically longer. They have more complexity, and that's what we see in our service. I mean, my son he's 25 in May. His prognosis was not to live past 2. He had 58 admissions to hospital before he was 5. We've had 2 episodes on palliative care that he's graduated from. We've had multiple admissions to ICU, and the last long admission to hospital was for 5 months, where he acquired a tracheostomy and then, requires ventilation at night time through that. So all of those things, you don't come out the other side of those without more complexity. And I guess the space that we operate in the disability sector is about supporting the life, because the life should still be rich and it should be joyful, but these people need to be safe and they need to be well cared for, and those medical and complex needs need to be well supported in the community.
I want to talk about, I think it's relevant to ask that, how has your individual purpose, from being a family member, then being a parent, then, nursing career, CEO at a disability organization, and how has your purpose evolved across different settings, the different roles you have played?
Yeah.
And what's your purpose?
My purpose is to make a difference. I mean, I can't get out of bed if I don't really fundamentally believe in that. And every day you have to feel that you've made some small dint in it. And look, there's some days you feel you take 10 steps backwards, but you've got to look back on big chunks of things. I think when I was in hospitals and in acute care, I really brought a deep compassion to the table, and I see things from at that point, the patient's point of view and the family's point of view, in that my leadership was very, what we'd say, person-centric. After when you sit alongside someone for 50 plus admissions to hospital, you see it from a different lens. You see how interactions are felt, and what's important and what's not. And I tried to bring that very much to my leadership professionally in hospitals. I think I certainly have an angle of what it feels like to navigate complexity in healthcare and how exhausting that can be, and what we need to do to make that easier and more supportive for people. So I feel that there was always a thread of that, even though I didn't deal with disability per se every day. Certainly when it came through the front door, I was well versed to support that, because I understood what was needed, and I was more comfortable with it than what other people generally are. But certainly in the sector now, I feel like I've got this perspective of, I know what it needs to feel like and what it needs to look like from a personal perspective, and then I have this overarching understanding of clinical complexity and medical complexity, and how we tie that into our support models is where we are now.
In your role with Scope, could you talk about a bit more expand on the role and what are the key strategic initiatives you are working on, which have evolved through your own experience and which you're very passionate about.
Yeah. So my role at Scope is Chief Operating Officer for Victoria, which means that all service delivery reports up to me. So that is all our SIL accommodation, which is over 300 sites, and it's a very large portfolio. Our social connections programs, which traditionally were day and lifestyle programs or day programs. Our therapy services, and then also at Scope here we have a wonderful arm to our business that we're very proud of. That's our Communication Inclusion Resource Centre, and they work up a whole lot of. They do a lot of things around access for communication and disability access, nationally, internationally. They do some really good things, and a lot of their work is grant funded or mission funded from the organisation. So 85% of what we do here at Scope is SIL, so supported independent living. We have a real mixture in our service offering here. We are the combination of many parts, and we have a lot of history in our organisation from different parts. So we have the original Scope business, which used to be called the Spastic Society, and the origins of that was that was an organisation set up by parents who were looking for solutions for their children who by and large had cerebral palsy. So it was very therapy-based, very day centre-based, and as those children grew up, it then moved into accommodation. So most of that service sort of grew, I would say, organically, not unlike many other disability services in Victoria. And they were led by passionate parents who were committed to finding solutions for their children because there were no other solutions for them. So we have that part of our business that has sort of, aged and changed a bit. And many of those older parents are no longer here at 75 years old. So they would be very old. And then, we acquired a large proportion of state government homes that we refer to as Home at Scope. And that was a huge acquisition, and there was over 240 homes as part of that acquisition in Victoria. And many of the people that we support in those homes were some of the last in the state to be deinstitutionalised. So they came out of institutions into homes in the community, which means that they've lived in institutions for a long time in their life, and that has impacts on them. It also means that some of those people don't have families. They were given up and put into an institution. It also means that some of those people were considered to be accessing housing of last resort because of significant behaviours and things. So we've got a real mixture in that group that formulate the other part of what Scope does. So we have a mixture of clients, we have a mixture of housing stock. A lot of it is not purpose-built for the needs of the people that we have today, and there's various amounts of work being done around all of that, and also, our workforce has come from different parts as well.
Oh, powerful. Thanks for sharing. 4.5 years of Royal Commission, and it has come through a long list of recommendations, and there's so many segments within the whole, the multiple volumes of the Royal Commission recommendations. How has Scope evolved and understood and implemented some parts of the recommendations, or what are the things which you are, somewhere in principally working?
Yeah. Look, there's a lot in that. There's 6.5 kilos of report, I think, is the weight of it. And I guess an organisation like Scope has been very close to the Royal Commission, and Kate McRae gave evidence at the Royal Commission last year. So we're very interested and very invested, obviously, in the stories that were bravely told and the recommendations from the Royal Commission. I guess we're putting as much in place as we can, and we will continue to work through all of those recommendations. As a parent, I really welcomed the Royal Commission and the lens and the spotlight that it put over that, and I absolutely commend every parent and every person with a disability that that bravely put their story forward and told that for the country. I think that it's the best thing that could ever happen. It's also very confronting to read what has occurred in the past, and the responsibility that you hold in a role like mine to ensure that we have as much in place to ensure that bad things don't happen. But I think some of the recommendations from the Royal Commission will lead Australia into a really good place going forward. For example, the recommendation to reduce the number of people that would live in SIL sites, for example, and move away from large group homes, and I really welcome that. I think that that's a really a good tangible thing that we were already starting to chip away at, and that is going to make an enormous difference to how Australians live their life going forward. So, bit by bit, I think is the answer. Yeah.
I think it's a journey, it's an evolution.
Absolutely.
For the ecosystem, for the public sector, for the larger ecosystem, and for as a country to evolve and then go through the whole journey. And for last 1 year, NDI has gone through a review.
Yep.
We have a roughly 400 odd page long report. And there are many sections of the recommendations and the 26 recommendations across different segments. Which recommendations do you have views on broadly? Some recommendations, and what you feel?
Oh, look, I guess I could only speak broadly about this at this point, but it would, it's the ones that pertain to our service areas and how they're costed going forward. And I think what's of real concern is how we as providers are able to continue to provide a service that's a bare minimum compliant, but it needs to be much better than just compliant, that really value adds to a person's life and to be able to do it sustainably going forward. So we need to, I think, the pricing model needs to reflect the reality of what it is. And in particular, when I talk about that, around the complexity of the people that live in Australia with disability. So, that talks to, how we support them with nursing supports, with therapy, all of those things that will enable them to live healthier lives, and therefore lives that are more of value and more joyful and happy, like the rest of Australia can do.
And as you know, the pricing will be moved out of NDI to Independent Health and Aged Pricing Authority. So probably that will bring in a third-party lens on looking at, and then probably there will be benchmarks to be comparing NDI's pricing within the aged care and the broader health system.
Yeah.
So looking forward to see what comes out of that. I wanted to, because you have so large number of SIL accommodation, and how does supported decision making play within the scope, lived experience?
Yeah, it's really important. It's really important that people with a disability have a say in how they live their life and what sort of support they get, by who and when. It's really, really important. The rest of the country can do that, and they should be able to do that as well. So it's really important, and we need to be really clear that we've got training and mechanisms in place to ensure that our clients are truly getting that. And that the investment at our front line needs to be significant in terms of training and supervision and equipping our people at the front line to best enable that with all the people we support.
Thank you. There's a very colloquial term in Australia we use, "Are we there yet?" And then we've been talking about a journey, and
No.
and partly, the journey is for the disability sector. We have been through a lot. People with disabilities, their families, carers, and the rest of Australia is also coming along on that journey. And if I have to pose this rhetorical question to you, which is, are we there yet on a journey to inclusive and fairer Australia? What would your response be?
Sometimes. I think it's still harder for people with a disability to access all the things that everybody else can and take for granted. Tickets to an event for people who need wheelchair accessibility are really problematic. Rest of us can queue online, as frustrating as that may or may not be, for people with a disability through one of the larger ticket providers. They must submit a form and wait for somebody to call them back, and you have no control about when that is. And that's really demeaning, and it really puts people at a disadvantage. Access into buildings is still hard sometimes. Public transport is still hard. You still, it's a lot better than what it was. We are on a journey, there's no doubt about that. But people who are wheelchair dependent still need to plan a journey depending on where accessibility can be obtained. So it's not as easy as what it is for everybody else. I think people that are non-verbal and are not able to advocate for themselves have a harder time accessing anything, and in particular accessing healthcare services. We do a lot of work in terms of working with government bodies and other organisations around accessibility and communication, and we've got some great projects through our CIRC, the division of our business, that is going a long way to improving communication access for people, but we've still got a long way to go.
Lovely. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for sharing your views.
That's fine, my pleasure.
You.